Ever feel like your brain is playing tricks on you? Well, it really is. In this video, we're going to talk about a bunch of brain glitches that we've all experienced at some point in our lives. The doorway effect. This has probably happened to you before. You get up to do something, walk from one room to another, and suddenly you completely forget why you stood up in the first place. This is called the doorway effect. Researchers have found that when you walk through a doorway, your brain treats that moment like a mental boundary and stores information from each room in separate context-dependent memory segments. That's why it can be so hard to remember what you were looking for in the previous room. It's almost as if your brain files the information from each room into a separate folder. This effect is usually stronger when the new environment is very different from the last one, and it happens much less when the two spaces look almost the same. Don't worry though, most of the time if you go back to where you came from, your brain will pull that missing information back up again. Time dilation. Have you ever been in a dangerous situation, like a car accident, and suddenly felt as if time slowed down? This phenomenon is called time dilation. In stressful moments, the brain usually processes more details than it does in normal conditions, which is why you later remember the event as if time had stretched out, even though time itself didn't actually slow down. It's like changing a video's settings from 30 frames per second to 120 frames per second, then assuming that because there are 4 times as many frames, the video must be 4 times longer. This isn't just a strange quirk, it's a survival mechanism. By doing this, the brain understands threats more clearly. That's why time feels longer during fear, while in everyday life it flows along at its usual pace. The Baader-Meinhof Phenomenon. Have you ever noticed that sometimes, once you learn a new word or discover a new topic, you suddenly start seeing it everywhere? This phenomenon is called the Baader-Meinhof Effect, also known as the frequency illusion. In reality, because your brain is constantly filtering information, when something becomes important to you, it moves that thing, something that was always there but you ignored before, into a higher priority. That's why when you learn something new, it feels like everyone is suddenly talking about it. However, the truth is that nothing unusual has happened. You're just noticing it now. False memories. Our memory isn't like a camera that records everything exactly as it happened. Instead, it reconstructs events, and in that process, the brain sometimes fills in gaps with things that never actually occurred. Research shows that people can confidently talk about specific experiences that were never real, especially when they're asked to visualize the event and retell it in detail. Around 30% of people can form completely fabricated memories under certain conditions. That's why eyewitness testimony isn't always reliable, since two people can remember the same scene in completely different ways. False memories show how the brain can convincingly rebuild details that never existed and still feel completely believable. Déjà vu. Have you ever gone somewhere new and suddenly felt like you'd been there before, or felt as if an event was happening the same way it had in the past? This phenomenon is called déjà vu, and one of the strangest brain glitches, one that scientists still haven't fully explained. One theory suggests that the brain sometimes gets confused and can't tell whether something actually happened before, which creates that feeling of familiarity. Another theory says it might be caused by tiny delays in the brain's processing system. Whatever the cause, it's one of those weird brain errors that almost all of us experience. The McCollough Effect. If you stare at certain color patterns long enough, your brain can start seeing colors that aren't actually there, even hours later. This is called the McCollough Effect, a strange optical illusion that scientists still don't fully understand. Unlike typical afterimages that fade quickly, this effect can last for months after repeated or extended exposure to the patterns. It's a reminder that your brain doesn't just receive information, it actively adapts and reshapes how it interprets what you see, and sometimes it gets things wrong. Capgrass Delusion. Imagine looking right at your loved ones, yet feeling certain they aren't really them, that they're imposters. This condition is called the Capgrass Delusion, a rare but terrifying error of the brain. It seems to happen when the connection between face recognition and the feeling of familiarity is disrupted. The brain recognizes the face, but the usual sense of emotional closeness doesn't activate. As a result, it feels like the people around you aren't their real selves and have been replaced by doubles. This condition is often seen in neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's or dementia, and it shows just how fragile our sense of familiarity really is. The scene completion illusion. Have you ever glanced at a sign or a sentence and felt sure you read it correctly, only to realize later that you were wrong? The brain usually fills in gaps and missing details based on the topic and what it expects the sentence to say. This helps us read quickly and understand incomplete information, but it can also lead to errors. Errors that make us misread a sentence and see words that aren't actually there. The brain is constantly predicting and guessing, trying to work as fast as possible, but sometimes it jumps to conclusions before fully processing the information, and that's when mistakes happen. Tip of the tongue phenomenon. Sometimes in the middle of speaking, you hit a word that you know exactly what it is, you can almost hear it in your head, but strangely, you just can't say it out loud. This is the well-known tip of the tongue phenomenon. It's an annoying glitch where the brain can't pull a word out of memory and bring it into speech. Researchers believe this happens because the brain sometimes stores different pieces of a word, like its meaning, its sound, or even its first letter, in separate places. When it can't retrieve all of that information at the same time and fast enough, the word stays stuck. The good news is that the word usually pops back into your mind later, suddenly and out of nowhere. Saying the wrong word. Have you ever suddenly called your friend by a completely different name or mixed up words in an embarrassing way? This is a type of speech slip known as a spoonerism, a brain glitch that mixes up similar or related words because they're stored in nearby neural areas. Fatigue, stress, or multitasking makes it happen even more often. It's not dangerous at all, though it can be pretty funny sometimes and occasionally a little embarrassing. Your brain is just trying to work fast, and that speed sometimes comes at the cost of accuracy. Misplacing objects in plain sight. Have you ever looked for your phone while it's literally in your hand, searched for your glasses while they're on your head, and hunted for your keys while they're right in front of you? This is a type of inattentional blindness. It happens when your brain sometimes ignores familiar things that are part of your usual routine, thinking they don't need to be processed. So when you're looking for your keys, your brain expects them to be somewhere else and skips over the space right in front of you, assuming it's not worth paying attention to. Word substitutions in texting. You've probably sent a message to a friend and later realized you swapped some words without even noticing. For example, you meant to type coffee but ended up writing cookie instead. This isn't always the fault of your messaging app's autocorrect. Sometimes your brain just makes a mistake. Similar concepts are grouped in your mind and your motor memory takes over. You think you typed one word, but your brain and fingers actually spell out another. It's one of those digital age brain glitches we've all run into. Wait, did I lock the door? You leave the house, take a few steps, and suddenly wonder if you locked the door or not. This happens because routine, repetitive tasks are processed by the brain's automatic systems, and your mind doesn't consciously keep track of them. It's a way the brain automates everyday actions to boost efficiency, which can make those tasks feel invisible and leave you unsure if you actually did them. Sometimes you really might have forgotten to lock the door, but most of the time you just can't remember because your brain was in autopilot mode. Reading but not processing. We've all had the experience of reading a full page in a book only to realize afterward that we have no idea what it was about. This happens when your brain is automatically reading the words, but understanding them, which requires conscious focus, doesn't happen. Your eyes are following the text, but your mind is wandering elsewhere. When you're distracted, the connection between the visual input and cognitive processing breaks, which is why we sometimes have to go back and read a paragraph several times. It's not your fault. Your brain just hasn't allocated enough resources to focus and process the words. Hearing words wrongly. Have you ever been listening to a song and heard a line that makes no sense at all? This is called a Mondegreen, an auditory illusion where the brain fills in incomplete sounds based on context, expectations, and background noise. That's why song lyrics are often misheard. Your brain is always trying to make sense of the sounds around you, even if the result is completely wrong and hilarious.
The why I grab my phone.
You pick up your phone to open a specific app, and suddenly you're in a completely different app, forgetting why you even grabbed your phone. This happens because distractions disrupt our short-term memory. When you pick up your phone and see a notification, your train of thought is interrupted, and your focus is completely broken. It's like the doorway effect, but in the digital world. Constantly multitasking makes this disruption even more likely. You haven't really forgotten anything. You've just hit a common disconnect between attention and memory. Thanks for watching the video all the way through. Drop us a comment and tell us which of these glitches you've experienced. If you enjoyed this video, check out our other one about momentary body glitches. See you next time.